poaching is the illegal hunting of wild animals, and the people who are involved in poaching or hunting of these wild animals are called as poachers. Pollination is nothing but wherein for the setting of seeds, the bees have to deposit the pollen grains from the anther of the plant to the stigma of the one more flower. The villagers will start killing these wild animals because they are posing a threat to the people. So eventually the population of these wildlife can also drastically decrease. Hello everyone, a warm welcome to today's session on Environmental Studies for second semester B.Ba. I'm Dr. Divya, Environmental Studies faculty, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. So in today's session, let us continue with studying Unit 4, that is Biodiversity and Conservation. In today's session, let us concentrate on the threats to biodiversity. So the threats to biodiversity are mainly because of these four reasons, that is because of habitat loss, because of poaching or hunting of the wildlife, because of conflict between or fight between man and wildlife, that is man-wildlife conflicts, and because of biological invasion. So under these headings, we shall study each of these one by one. So first talking about habitat loss. So what do you mean by habitat? So habitat is a region wherein a particular organism lives. So aquatic habitat, terrestrial habitat. So wherever an organism lives, that becomes its particular habitat. And if that particular habitat is lost, it will be a threat to that particular organism. So therefore, habitat loss being one of the major causes for the loss of biodiversity. So loss or destruction of habitat can occur mainly because of the intervention by the human beings, such as bringing about deforestation. So deforestation is nothing but deforestation, the removal of trees or the cutting of trees. So why human beings usually go in for deforestation? It is in order to make agricultural lands, for filling the wetlands, to make land for construction. So one reason is deforestation is mainly done to make way for the agricultural land so that the growing population can be fed to the fullest. So that is one of the reasons. And this deforestation leads to habitat loss. Therefore, when the animals lose their home or the plants lose their home, then they cannot survive there, therefore leading to biodiversity loss. Next is filling of wetlands. We all know that a number of ponds and rivers have been filled in order to make space for construction. So therefore, the aquatic habitat is lost and therefore it is a threat to the biodiversity. So filling wetlands to make land for construction purposes and building dams across rivers. So when dams are built across rivers, what happens? It will affect the movement of the fishes or the aquatic organisms that are there in that particular water. Say for example, fishes, they move from one area of the water to another region during the spawning time or during the reproduction time. Now, when you construct a dam in between, you are building something that is preventing the fishes from going from one area of the water to another area for spawning purpose or for reproduction purpose. So therefore, what happens? It will result in a decrease in the population of the fishes. And again, if the population of fishes decreases, the aquatic food chain will get altered, right? So that is how it results in the overall biodiversity loss. Why? Because these dams usually, they will divert the flow of the water. Therefore, in that particular habitat, how much flow of water should have occurred? That will not happen because the flow of water would have diverted to different regions because of the construction of the dam, therefore posing a threat to the aquatic life or the aquatic biodiversity that is there in that particular biome. And not just that, there are mining activities also which results in a lot of damage to the biodiversity because Mining involves the clearing of the forest, the drilling of the land, and all that will actually lead to soil erosion, and also it poses a threat to the biodiversity on the whole. And also some of the natural calamities such as drought. So drought is the unavailability of the water, that is the dry conditions, the drought, the flooding of water, the storm, and the forest fires. So these natural calamities can also, so natural calamities usually don't occur because of human intervention. It is because of nature, which is unavoidable. So therefore, these natural calamities can also cause habitat loss, therefore posing a threat to the biodiversity. So because of human intervention, how threat occurs to the biodiversity? It is because of the deforestation, filling of wetlands, construction of dams, then mining activities, and so on. Next, habitat loss. It creates a major threat to both the animal and the plant species in that particular population, and also this habitat loss, if it continues in that particular area for some extent, it can completely wipe out a particular plant or animal species which is endemic to that particular region. So endemic means those organisms which are found in a particular region, but you don't find them anywhere else in the world. So if that particular region, say for example, we have the sandalwood. So sandalwood is found, for example, only in one forest in Karnataka. Now you clear that forest because for various purposes, what happens? The entire sandalwood population will get wiped out, and therefore it will become extinct. So that is what happens. It can completely wipe out a species if habitat loss occurs, and making them extinct at the end, and also it results in a conflict between humans and animals. So habitat loss can also result in conflict between humans and animals. Why? Because habitat loss can also occur because of construction of roads. We all have seen between national parks, they have constructed roads for people to easily commute from one region to another, right? But that would have been the elephant corridors, for example. When I say elephant corridor means it is the area wherein the elephant passes from one end of the forest to the other end. Now in that area, if you build a road or if you construct a road in the center, obviously the animal has to pass through that area itself because they are accustomed or they are used to that particular passage, right? You might have seen in whenever you're traveling through a forest area and all, you might have seen in the highways they would have put a board, animal crossing, animal corridor, right? Means that is a place where actually the animals cross. So therefore, when animals cross those regions, obviously it will result in a conflict or a fight between the humans and the animals. So habitat loss can also cause a conflict between man and wildlife. Next important threat or next major threat to biodiversity is because of poaching of wildlife. So poaching is nothing but in simple terms it is hunting. Poaching is the illegal hunting of wild animals, and the people who are involved in poaching or hunting of these wild animals are called as poachers. So poachers, they usually kill wildlife. Some people can kill wildlife for recreational purposes, and some people kill wildlife so that they can use their parts for medicinal purposes. Like it is said that the horn of rhinoceros is used for medicine. Even these lizards, that is the monitor lizards or some of the big lizards that are there, they are also hunted and killed because they are used as medicine in some part of the countries wherein they dry them and they use them in preparation of some of the medicine. So that is the reason. So for medicinal purposes, for their fur, example, tiger and fox and all that are killed for their fur, and also to sell as showpieces. Like showpieces means the tusk of elephants. It is kept as a showpiece. It is used in making jewelries and all that. For that it is used. It is used in making some of the arty crafts. So for that it is used. Even tiger skin, the tiger claws, the teeth of the tiger, all that is used for as showpieces. So for that particular purpose, for use in leather industries, especially crocodile and all. They are used for making leather, wherein the bags. So some people are obsessed with bags which are made out of the animal hide. And also in order to make luxury goods. To make luxury goods also, these animals are poached. So poaching eventually for recreational purposes as well as to make money will eventually lead to a decline in the population of that particular animal. And if it is not taken care of, or if strict laws and measures are not put into prevent poaching, then it can lead to complete loss of that particular animal species. And I had told you in some of the previous sessions when we were studying that, especially in the food chain and food web, one species is lost from the environment, it can alter the food chain and the food web, and it can completely alter that particular ecosystem. So therefore, poaching of wildlife is one of the major threats to biodiversity. And these poachers, they also smuggle animals. They capture the animals and they use it for a circus purpose and all that. Now also illegally animals are used for circus purpose and all that, for entertainment purpose. And also some of the wild animals are smuggled and they are sold as exotic pets. Like we have the star tortoise. Star tortoise is one such tortoise whose shell is made up of some yellow star-shaped structures. So beautiful it looks when you look at the tortoise. And people like to keep it as pets. People like to keep monitor lizards as pets. There are people who are crazy enough to keep pythons and all that as pets, right? So to such people, they are sold. So if that is the case, it will bring down the breeding population of the animals and eventually lead to the extinction of those animals. And all these activities of poaching can cause loss of the species and therefore extinction of the endangered species, or it can completely wipe out the endangered and the endemic species. So here I've put the star tortoise, as you can see here, how beautiful the shell looks, right? Because of that only some people prefer it as keeping for pets and all that. So here example, elephants are hunted for their tusks, then rhinoceros, they are hunted for their horns, then whales are hunted for their oil, as well as in some parts of the world they are used as meat, and also the oil of the whale that is rich in omega-3 fatty acids, it is used in making a lot of supplements. And deers for their antlers, and also there are some deers, especially the musk deer that is there. It is hunted mainly to prepare the scents. So actually it has a pleasant scent, that musk scent. Of course, now you get that synthetic forms of musk perfumes and all that. But apart from that, that animal is also used to prepare musk scents. And they are also hunted as for show pieces, etc. That is, deer antlers are kept as show pieces. Nowadays you don't find, but when you go to that is old houses, ancestral houses and all that, you can see wherein they have stuffed deer heads, antlers and all that hung on the wall, right? But now it is quite illegal. If you have it at your home, then you will be behind the bar. So that is different now, but earlier hunted especially to keep them as a show pieces. Next, poaching of animals, especially birds, also causes a decline in the population of the bird, and eventually it can lead to the near extinction of a plant species. Birds and plants are interconnected to one another because birds help in the process of pollination. Like how bees help in pollination, birds also help in pollination. So what is pollination here? Pollination is nothing but wherein for the setting of seeds, the bees have to deposit the pollen grains from the anther of the plant to the stigma of the one more flower. So therefore the seeds will set. That is the natural process how the setting of seeds occur. And likewise, there are some animals and birds which also help in pollination, therefore helping in the setting of seeds. What happens here is continuously some of the bird species are killed or poached or hunted, which will cause a decline in the extinction of a plant species. So to make you understand here, I've taken the example of the extinct bird dodo. So dodo, a story behind this is very nice. Actually, dodo is such a bird that there is a tree which is called as dodo tree. So this dodo tree, it is said that only one tree is present in the world today. Overall, nowhere you can find a dodo tree. Only in one of the national park, one tree is there, and they have preserved it in such a way that they have put fencing and all that, and they are trying to preserve that tree. Now, what is the speciality of this dodo tree? So, this is the extinct dodo bird that I've put here. So, dodo tree, actually, seeds are there of the dodo tree. So, this bird, that is dodo bird, it will eat the fruit of the dodo tree. So, when it eats the fruit, the seeds will pass through the gut or through the intestine of the dodo bird, and eventually it will come out. That is during excretion or during the fecal process. So here what happens here is, only if the seed passes through the gut or the intestine of the dodo bird and then it falls on the ground, then only it will germinate. Otherwise, these seeds will not germinate, because in the dodo's intestine there are some chemical compounds which will break open the hard seed coat, or it will make the seeds to germinate when it falls on the ground. Dodo bird is usually found in Mauritius. So here what happened was, during the olden eras, people, when they used to go for voyage, so like that, one set of people or group of people, they happened to land in this particular island where dodo population was there. And there, when there was scarcity of food for them, they started to hunt this bird. And they started to taste the meat of the bird. And they found out that this bird tasted exactly like turkey. So that is when they started to continuously hunt these birds. And the birds became completely extinct from that, or abolished from that particular island. Now, when the bird became extinct, there was no dodo bird remaining to eat the fruit of the dodo tree. So how will the dodo seeds germinate? Because there is no dodo bird, because the dodo seeds can germinate only if the seeds passes through the intestine of the dodo bird. So that is how, because of the extinction of the dodo bird, the dodo trees have become extinct, or that is why only one tree is remaining today on this planet. So that is how. There are some plants especially which can germinate only if they pass through the gut of certain animals. So that is why poaching of wildlife poses a threat to the biodiversity. Now, because of the extinction of the dodo bird, the dodo tree became extinct. Now, that remaining dodo tree will also become extinct, because no longer they can grow that tree anymore, because the dodo bird is not there, right? So that is how poaching can pose a threat to the biodiversity. So next, let's study about one more threat to biodiversity, that is human-wildlife conflict. So what is this human-wildlife conflict? So any interaction between humans and wildlife that results in negative impact on human, social and economic or cultural life, on the conservation of wildlife populations or on the environment, is called human-wildlife conflict. So it is nothing but interaction between the humans and the wildlife. So this interaction between the humans and the wildlife can pose a threat to the life of the humans, the life of the wildlife. It can alter the social, economic and cultural life of the people, and also it can alter the conservation of wildlife population, and also it can bring a major effect on the environment. So any change that occurs on the environment or on the life of the people or on those animals, it is nothing but human-wildlife conflict. So here, talking about human-wildlife conflict as one of the reasons for biodiversity threat. So what are the outcome of these conflict? So because of human-wildlife conflict, it can cause injury to humans as well as livestock, and also loss of their life. So every now and then we read in the newspapers, there has been a leopard attack, there has been a trampling by the elephant and all that. Again here, we are not supposed to blame the animals, because it is we human beings are responsible for why the animals are behaving like that. Say for example, if elephants are there, then they can damage the fully grown agricultural lands, and therefore they can cause a huge economic loss to the farmers, and they can also destroy the human habitat and their property, and they can also decrease the species population, and also it can result in decrease in species population, because eventually what will happen, the villagers will start killing these wild animals because they're posing a threat to the people. So eventually the population of these wildlife can also drastically decrease. So these are the outcomes of the human wildlife conflict. So next, what are the strategies that can be followed in order to prevent human wildlife conflict? So the population of the predator prey should be maintained. If the population of the predator prey should be maintained, then we human beings should stop interfering with the forest life of these animals, right? So if the forests are not destroyed, what happens? The population of the plants will be more. Therefore, the population of the herbivores will increase. Therefore, there will be enough food for the carnivorous animals to feed on. So, when there is food for these carnivorous animals to feed on, why will they enter into villages, right? Only when, because of the lack of food, they enter into villages. And who is responsible for that? We human beings only. So, therefore, population of the predators prey should always be maintained in the forest, and frequent scientific surveys should be conducted in order to try to understand why people are disturbing animal habitat. So usually people disturb animal habitat. What they do is, say for example, there is an area wherein they have put a boundary or property of human beings which is there at the edge of the forest area. So what these human beings do is, they illegally, they cut the trees and they try to expand their agricultural lands towards the forest area. Therefore, what happens? These animals that are living in that forest, eventually over years, they will not have enough amount of food. So they'll not have an option, and they'll obviously have to enter into villages searching for food. For all this, strict measures should be taken by the government, wherein they have to curb or they have to prevent the illegal expansion of the agricultural land towards the forest. So if all that is done, that is, every year they have to do a scientific survey. What was the area of the forest previous year and what is the area of the forest now? So when they do a scientific survey, they'll come to know that, okay, people are illegally extending their agricultural lands into the forest, and that is why animals are entering into villages. So that is how scientific surveys should be done frequently, and villages and fields near to animal habitats should have proper fencing. So usually electric fencing will be done around the areas, or that is the boundaries of the forest and the agricultural land, so that it prevents the animals from entering into. Again, here also people should be educated and they have to be told how much amount of electricity should be passed through those fences, because we have heard of incidents wherein elephants have been electrocuted and all that, right? So all that also should be taught to the people. And also awareness should be brought about the habitat and movement of the animal to the locals. So how you should not cause a problem to the habitat. Therefore, you can prevent the animals from entering into villages. All that knowledge should be taught to the people so that the animals and the humans can live in harmony. Next, preventing the cattle from entering into carnivore animal territories. So it is said that once the carnivores, be it a tiger, a leopard or whatever, once it gets the taste of the cattle blood, it will come back again searching for cattle meat. That is what they say. So that is why it is always good to prevent the cattle or take care of the cattle in such a way that during grazing, they don't enter into the forest areas, so that the tigers, leopards, etc. don't get a taste of the cattle flesh, and therefore they don't make a habit to enter into villages to hunt for these cattle, so that the cattle population will also not reduce, and also it will not bring an economic loss to the farmers as well, and therefore it will not cause a conflict between the humans and the wildlife as well. So these are the different strategies, and apart from that, wherever there is a forest area, around the forest area, large trenches can be taken, especially for elephants. So you might have seen wherever there is a national park and all that, if there is a road, when you're traveling, you might have seen from the forest to the road, in the side, that is in the boundary between the forest and the road, they would have made large pits throughout, right? Large trenches, so that the elephants cannot come from that particular forest and enter into the roads. So that is how they can prevent human-wildlife conflict, by making large trenches. And also they can use traditional methods such as fire, chili smoke, honeybees, etc., so that they can scare away the wild animals with minimal harm. And also they can do one more thing, that is they can plant thorny bushes around human settlements. This is actually an African tradition. So you might have seen people who live, that the tribes who live in Africa, wherever their settlement is there, around their settlement they would have put thorny fences, so that the animals will not enter into their settlement. So same strategies can be followed everywhere as well, wherein thorny fences can be put around, so that the animals don't enter into the human settlements. And they can contact the officials instead of locals themselves taking inappropriate measures to scare away these animals. So always, whenever you find a snake inside your house, or whenever you find an animal that is somewhere near the human settlement, always, instead of you yourself taking any measures which is inappropriate, which may cause a threat to your life as well as the animal life, it is always better to contact the forest officers, so that they can come and help you out with that. So therefore, contact the officials instead of the locals themselves taking inappropriate measures. So these are the different strategies that can be adopted in order to prevent human-wildlife conflict. So why should we adopt all these strategies, right? You don't enter into the animal world, the animals will not enter into the human world. That is the only strategy if you follow. I think that is itself enough, wherein the animals will live on their own, the humans can live on their own. But still, we human beings are very greedy, wherein we always want to expand everything, so that we don't bother about the animals, and that is the time when all these strategies need to be put into actions. Next, talking about biological invasion. So biological invasion is also one of the major threat for biodiversity. So what is this biological invasions? So introduction of non-native species, either deliberately, that is on purpose, or accidentally, that is by mistake, and their establishment and dominance in the habitat is called biological invasion. So to make you understand this definition, the best example I can take of is Parthenium. You all know about Parthenium, right? Parthenium is one of the most devastating weeds that is growing everywhere nowadays. Do you think Parthenium is a plant of India? No, it doesn't belong to India. What happened was, during the import of wheat, along with the wheat grains, the Parthenium seeds also got mixed up with the wheat grains, and it came into India. And that is how it started to spread and establish in India. Now, wherever you go, you find this Parthenium. It has become a great havoc to the health of the people as well as animals also. So that is biological invasion. So how this biological invasion actually poses a threat to biodiversity, we'll look into. So biological invasions, we can also call them as the alien species. Alien means, don't think that they've come from some other planet. It is from the earth itself, but the only thing is they have come from some other region or from other country. They were not present in one country, but they have come from other country and they have established themselves in that particular country. So that is alien species. So what is the outcome of biological invasions? So it alters the functioning of the ecosystem, and it decreases the population of the native species because of competition and predation. So one of the best example I'll give you for this to make you understand is a catfish. There is an African catfish. So African catfish, actually, which was introduced because it had good amount of meat in it. It was introduced into the ponds in many of the countries. So it was brought from Africa and it was introduced into the ponds of many countries. So what these African catfish started to do was, it started to eat all the small fishes and other economically important fishes in the pond, therefore completely decreasing their population, and also it caused extinction of some of the fish species. Now this is an alien species, right? It's which posed a threat to the other species of fishes that are there. So therefore they decrease the population of the native species because of competition and predation, wherein I took an example of the African catfish that was introduced to many ponds and rivers and all that, and into aquaculture and pisciculture in most of the countries. And it alters the genetic diversity, and the dominance of these alien species can result in the extinction of endemic species. Say for example, there is a frog species that is only endemic to the Western Ghats, meaning they are found only in the Western Ghat forest, but they are not found anywhere else. Now, you have introduced a reptile, for example, a snake species in that Western Ghat. Now, that snake species will start continuously hunting on this frog species, and eventually what happens? The frog species will become extinct. Why it will become extinct? Because it is found only in the Western Ghats and it is not found anywhere else in the world. So therefore, introduction of an alien species can cause an endemic species to become extinct. So that is how I took an example to make you understand. And invasive plants can alter the microbiome or the population of the bacteria, good bacteria, fungi and all that are there in the soil, which help in the growth of the plant. And also it can affect the human health. To make you clearly understand, I'll take the example of a plant, that is Lantana camera. Most of you have seen this plant. Usually it is grown as an ornamental also in houses, and apart from that, usually in the forest area you can find these plants growing abundantly. It is Lantana camera. So this Lantana camera, actually it is not a species of India. It was introduced, or it came into India as an ornamental because of the beautiful flowers it had. Very beautiful to look, right? It's so beautiful, brightly colored. So that is why they introduced it into India as an ornamental plant to grow in gardens and all that. What happened was, somehow they entered into the forest area because of the dispersal of the seeds and all that. They entered into the forest area. Now, wherever you go, especially in South India, if you see, wherever you go in the forest, you can find these plants. They are growing to such an extent that they, kilometers together, they have started growing as a weed in the forest. Now, you can say these are beautiful, right? They can grow in the forest. What is wrong with that? Now, when these are growing there, the competition for nutrition, space, everything will occur. Therefore, and moreover, these are so fast growing that it will prevent other plants to grow there. And not just that, these have thorny stems, and therefore they will prevent the movement of animals freely inside the forest. And not just that, these plants are said to have some toxic chemical in them, which by mistake, if eaten by the animals, it can lead to the death of the animal. So that is how, by mistake, alien species, they actually pose a threat to the biodiversity. And not just that, as I gave the example of Parthenium. As I told you, Parthenium was brought, it was mixed in during the import of wheat from other country, and the seeds nowadays, wherever you go, you can find in the agricultural fields, in the wastelands, and in some abandoned house sites and all that, you can find this Parthenium growing. Parthenium is not good for animals, and also the Parthenium flowers, the pollen of the Parthenium causes a lot of respiratory disorders in human beings as well. So that is how they have started invading a particular region. And also there is one best example of a cactus in Australia. So a cactus was introduced in Australia because it produced beautiful red colored fruits, which was very attractive. So from the garden, it escaped into the other areas of Australia and it started covering those areas, bringing down the population of the other plant species there. So that is also one of the example. And not just that, there is also one more example that I can take off is Eichhornia, that is water hyacinth. There is a plant called as water hyacinth. So this plant, usually you can find them in ponds, lakes and all that. So this plant, why it was brought into various countries because it produced beautiful lilac or violet colored flowers. And in order to beautify the ponds, it was actually introduced. But they started growing so fast and they started completely covering the ponds to such an extent that it started killing all the other phytoplanktons, the aquatic habitat and all that of that particular pond. So that is how water hyacinth is also one of the alien species whose biological invasion posed a threat to various aquatic habitats. So therefore, biological invasions always poses a threat to biodiversity. So next, how can we prevent biological invasions? So increasing public awareness. So I have told you now what all can happen if biological invasion occurs. So like that, educating people will make people think twice before bringing or introducing a new species from some other country into one particular country, wherein better information can be provided and education regarding how to control and eradicate invasive species has to be taught to the people. And also, awareness should be brought among the people who are involved in ecotourism business on the problems caused by the invasive species. And also, various workshops should be conducted for the people who are involved in this tourism business so that they get proper guidelines to prevent unintentional transport or an unauthorized introduction of invasive plants and animals to vulnerable ecosystem. And also, tourism, whoever are dealing with tourism, they have to be trained on how to quarantine and border control the species. What do you mean by quarantine? Quarantine was a word that was very famous during the corona times, right? So what do you mean by quarantine? Even plants and animals are also subjected to quarantine. So what they do is, say for example, you are bringing a plant species from somewhere, from some other country. So before it enters into the country, it has to be quarantined for certain time to see that whether it is suitable for this particular country or whether it will pose a threat to the biodiversity. After all these studies are conducted, then only it is introduced into the particular country to which it is brought. So that is how quarantining of the plant and animal species has to be done, so that if they find out that they may be a threat to biodiversity in the future, it is better to avoid planting or using those or introducing those foreign species or alien species into a particular country. Next is identify and manage pathways that might allow the entry of invasive species through national and international trade. So that is why there should be very strict checks done in airports as well as in the ship ports, so that some alien species will unnecessarily not enter into the country. And also be strict in tourism, shipping, fisheries, agriculture, air transport, forestry, horticulture, landscaping, pet trade and aquaculture. So all these strict measures should be followed. And early detection of newly introduced invasive species and taking proper measures or rapid action in order to eradicate them, following socially, culturally and ethical acceptable, efficient, non-polluting control methods. It is said that a bug has been introduced which is capable of feeding onto Parthenium and destroying Parthenium continuously. Now it is a non-pollution control method, right? So whenever you think that an alien species is posing a threat to the biodiversity, it is always good to do research on it and bring out a measure, a non-polluting measure, so that the growth of these species can be curbed. And therefore, they do not have an adverse effect on the native flora and fauna, and also they don't have any adverse effect on the health and well-being of human beings, domestic animals as well as crops also. So, the best example is Parthenium. Parthenium, it grows to such extent in the field that it prevents the growth of the native crops that are growing in the field. So, at that time, research has to be done very quickly and it has to be introduced in order to prevent the growth of the Parthenium. So, like that, various measures can be taken in. So these are the various methods that can be followed in order to prevent biological invasions. So next, talking about conservation of biodiversity. So under conservation of biodiversity, there are two types of conservation, that is in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. In situ conservation means conservation in the natural habitat itself. Conservation in the natural habitat itself is called in situ conservation. Ex situ conservation means from that habitat you remove that particular organism, you bring it somewhere else and then you take care of it. Now I hope you know between in situ and ex situ. Say for example, there is a national park. In that national park itself, national park is obviously that natural forest area. Some of the areas they would have considered it as a national park wherein human beings are not allowed. So in that area itself, if the animal is conserved, it will be a in situ conservation. Now from that national park, you remove it from there, bring it to a zoo and try to conserve the animal. It will be a ex situ conservation. So these are the two types of conservation, in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. So for in situ conservation, we have national parks, biosphere reserves, wildlife sanctuaries, sacred forests, rivers, lakes, oceans, etc. So in the natural habitat itself, you're conserving the wild animals. That is in situ conservation. So next, talking about ex situ conservation, here seed and gene banks, wherein you'll bring the seed and you'll store it in seed and gene banks for a longer time. So you're bringing it from an agricultural field, from a natural habitat, and you're putting it in a seed bank wherein you're preserving it there. That is ex situ conservation. Next is tissue culture banks. Then we have botanical gardens. Again, in botanical gardens also, you're bringing plant species from different regions from their natural habitat and you're growing it in a botanical garden. You're conserving it separately under strict rules and regulations. So that is also ex situ conservation. Next, zoological parks. Then we have captive breeding centers. So captive breeding centers means, say for example, there was a rhinoceros species which was said to become extinct very soon. Those rhinoceros species, they were brought to a captive breeding center and under strict observations, they were made to breed so that the offsprings or the babies can be produced. So that is now ex situ conservation, because from the natural habitat, you're bringing it into a breeding center and there you're trying to increase its population, or there you're trying to conserve it. So captive breeding center. And next is cryopreservation. So cryopreservation is nothing but wherein under very cold temperature, by using liquid nitrogen, the plant materials are preserved, so that whenever there is a catastrophe or something, using these plant material, you can remove that plant material from the liquid nitrogen and you can follow tissue culture techniques and you can generate a new plant out of it. So therefore, cryopreservation is also one of the ex situ conservation. So these are the two types of conservation of biodiversity: in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. This was about the session wherein we completely studied about the threats of biodiversity and also we learnt about the conservation of biodiversity. So in the next coming session, let us learn about ecosystem and biodiversity services. That is how these ecosystem and biodiversity services are of great ecological, economic, social, ethical, aesthetic and informational value to the people. So we shall continue with this in the next coming sessions. Thank you.